The very thing that we see happening time and time again today. You have two people, maybe they used to be in some sort of a relationship and they haven't been in a relationship for a long time, and suddenly one wants some sort of leverage over the other, be it they want to kick him out of the house, or maybe one has filed for a divorce, or maybe there's a custody issue with the kids, or who knows what reason. And the next thing you know, they're serving the other party with a PPO, a Michigan Personal Protection Order, which, by the way, takes effect immediately. The person being served has no opportunity to defend themselves, explain themselves, or anything. And if they fail to respond to the thing within 14 days, this order from the court that literally restricts their liberty suddenly goes into effect, and there's nothing that they can do about it. People are weaponizing the personal protection order process in Michigan for the wrong reasons. And if you or somebody you care about, get served with one of these bogus PPOs, you have to act fast and you have to act aggressively, and you better have, some sort of counsel, attorney, helping you out with this that knows their way around these documents, because they can have really serious consequences that affect your everyday life. Hi folks, my name is Keith Stickley. I'm with the Stickley Law Firm here in downtown Hillsdale, Michigan. For the past year or so, I've been making regular content trying to explain and break down legal problems that law-abiding citizens find themselves in. And I try to explain it and break it down into easy to understand language so that they actually have a shot and understand what might be happening with them when they find themselves having to deal with a court system. Now, it's important to keep in mind this video is not a substitute for real customized legal advice to your specific situation. If you or somebody you care about find yourselves in a similar situation, feel free to reach out to my firm here in Hillsdale, however, and we'll see if we can help you out. Today, we're going to be talking about something that happens more often than people want to admit, and that is PPOs, or personal protection orders, being used as a form of attack, basically as a false allegation in order to try to get leverage or control of somebody. In Michigan, personal protection orders are meant to protect people from real threats. But so often we're finding that they're not being filed for actual protection. And we're seeing this often in custody battles and divorces and breakups, and now even more than we've ever seen in family disputes, just simple family disputes amongst cousins or in-laws. And when that happens, the system can move really, really fast, and it can move against you before you even get a chance to speak or tell your side of the story. Before we get into exactly what we need to do once we get served, we need to talk about really what a personal protection order is in the state of Michigan. A personal protection order, or sometimes referred to as a PPO, and we're going to be using that language throughout the video, is a civil court order. It's not a criminal process per se, even though it's sort of criminal adjacent. It's a civil court order that a judge can grant what's called ex parte. That means without the person who's being accused present. You're probably aware of, or if you've watched any of our videos, that when a person is accused of a crime, they're entitled to their day in court, right? And if they're being accused of a crime, they have a right to counsel, they have a right to a defense, all those things. But these PPOs are a little bit different. They can be granted ex parte. In other words, the idea behind it is that the situation that would warrant a PPO properly being entered against somebody could be so grave, could present so much potential danger, that it has to be granted immediately, and then we'll figure out the details after. Somebody files a PPO against somebody by going to usually their local circuit court here in Michigan, and they fill out a series of forms, including a narrative. And that narrative is basically the accusation. The person would fill out and say the story of why they think that whoever's being served this PPO is such a terrible human being, or presents a risk to their immediate safety, that only the judge's orders could potentially prevent. And the judge only sees the petitioner. That's what we call the person who's filing the PPO against somebody, the petitioner. The judge only sees their affidavit, one side of the story. They don't even see the other side of the story. So there's nothing like cross-exam or anything before these things get granted. And if the judge finds that the narrative is spicy enough, or the allegations are grotesque enough, they will immediately sign and order the PPO to go in effect. As soon as that PPO goes into effect, the person who's being served or being targeted from the PPO, their name automatically goes into a thing called LEIN, the Law Enforcement Information Network. And so every police officer throughout the state, and even throughout in many cases throughout the country, will know that that person has a personal protection order pending against them. And instantly that person will be banned from having any sort of contact with the petitioner. The person who's served, if you're served the PPO, you're considered the respondent. That's the language that's used there. But the person being served this PPO, has the PPO placed against them, they have some really serious restrictions put on them. And there's Second Amendment restrictions as well. And at this front end, the court is not deciding which party is telling the truth. The court is simply deciding whether or not somebody has to be temporarily restricted from having any contact with somebody else, simply based on what the petitioner puts on the paper. That's it. It's an absolutely one-sided process. You should probably know that there's two distinct kinds of PPOs in Michigan. There's the domestic PPO, and now a domestic PPO is a PPO against somebody that you have some sort of familial relationship with potentially, or that you've ever resided with in a house, or that you have a child in common with. And then there's the stalking non-domestic style PPOs. And those PPOs, the requirements to have a violation and the requirements to put them in place are a little bit different. But the general rule of thumb is that you have to demonstrate that there's at least two non-continuous forms of offensive unwanted contact that would make a reasonable person feel like they're in potentially imminent danger or harm. We want to talk specifically about how PPOs get, and I'm going to use the term weaponized. In other words, here's how this process gets abused. And we see it all the time, and we fight these all the time. Let's talk about a couple of scenarios where these PPOs are getting abused that we see quite often. And probably the most common is in some sort of divorce filing. So one party files for divorce against the other party, and then they start bringing up allegations, or maybe something happened way, way in the past. And suddenly they go into the circuit court and they start filling out a PPO because they want to say, well, 10 years ago, my soon-to-be ex-spouse, did X, Y, or Z, and now I feel threatened. And they use that as a bit of leverage because it looks bad on paper, right? And all the other filings, when negotiations are going back and forth from the attorneys, they can say, oh, well, my client is a protected party. Your client is abusive. Look, see, the judge signed this PPO. And the same exact techniques of leverage are being used and abused in custody hearings. We see this a lot too. So one parent doesn't want the other parent to have custody of the child or is upset with the custody arrangements. So they go and file a PPO against the other parent in order to sort of claim, oh, look, this parent is unfit, for parenting, and I should have all the parenting time. That parent has a personal protection order against them, and a judge has deemed them to be, not safe or some unreasonable risk to my person. Time and time again, we deal with these after a breakup. A couple breaks up, some bad blood, somebody wants to get revenge on somebody else because maybe they found another lover. We just had one of those very recently. And so the person who feels like they got the short end of the stick goes and gets a PPO as, some kind of revenge or a way to assert control over them, past the relationship that is now clearly ended. The bottom line is, and people's theory behind filing these bogus PPOs is that they think that if they can paint somebody as dangerous on paper, then they can change the entire dynamic of whatever case is going on. And we're seeing it all the time. In order to sort of substantiate these allegations and tell the judge what a terrible person the other person is, they're taking out of context communications, like out of context text messages or emotional statements that are somehow now framed as threats. Or they're bringing up incidents that happened 15 years ago in one sense in the case that we just dealt with. Suddenly there's 15 years ago he did X, Y, and Z. Well, you didn't talk in the paper about how you did 17 other things up until that point, and just 3 weeks ago you guys were okay until he left and found another girlfriend, and now you're all mad, right? The inconvenient truth about this process is that the court system assumes caution first and then verification later. What happens if a PPO is entered? Somebody knocks on your door and they serve you the PPO. Number one, I'm going to tell you right now, it does not help you to not accept service, okay? So take the envelope. You're going to have to deal with the situation anyway. Running away isn't going to fix a single thing, I guarantee it. So what happens as soon as you are served is you're entered into LEIN. The police officers can see it. And quite frankly, encounters with the police become more tense because they see your name when they run your name. And I hear this all the time. When somebody has a PPO placed against them, suddenly they're getting pulled over all the time. That's because in Michigan, with all the computerized cars, the second that you're in LEIN as having a PPO, I doubt that there's any scientific research or data done on this, but I can tell you from personal experience in dealing with clients, suddenly people are getting pulled over and asked, questions all the time. And any contact with the petitioner while this PPO is in place can result in an arrest. This is a huge trap. This is a huge trap that we see all the time. Let me explain how it works, because this is a trap that unscrupulous people actually use to go and file a bad PPO because they want their, say, significant other or whoever the target is to get thrown in jail. PPOs are a one-way street. There's only one person that can modify the PPO once it's signed, and that's the judge. Whoever filed for the PPO has zero power once the PPO is granted. So let's say you are a guy and your girl goes and gets a PPO against you, okay, and you don't fight the PPO is in place, and she calls you up and says, baby, I'm sorry I got that PPO against you. I didn't mean it. I just need you to come back home. We're going to work on things, right? Then if you as the guy take that phone call and then go visit her, okay, don't be surprised when she calls the police show up and then they arrest you, even if there's nothing bad going on. They arrest you because you violated the PPO. And you know what? The judge can actually the judge will deem that a violation, and you can have a financial sanction and you can go to jail. And it happens all the time. PPOs are a one-way street. It doesn't have to be fair. It doesn't have to be right. It doesn't matter. If you violate it, even if the other person says it's fine, they're going to try to send you to jail. We deal with this time and time and time again. Guys, it is the classic trap. It is the classic trap. If somebody goes to the lengths to get a PPO against you and you are served with a PPO, okay, it's probably a good sign that win, lose, or draw, that's not somebody you should be with. And I tell you, if people followed that bit of advice, I'd probably have a lot less work out there. But every week we get a phone call with this exact same situation. How do you fight this thing once you get served? Well, the fact of the matter is you don't have a lot of time. You only have about 14 days to file a paper with the court that is a request to modify or terminate the PPO. And I can tell you from personal experience and seeing these happen between unrepresented people in courtrooms, this is not something that you want to do a lot. It doesn't matter if you hire my firm or somebody else, we're very good at it, but you need to be represented by a competent, aggressive attorney. That attorney needs to know the timelines and the deadlines for this thing. This attorney needs to know how to cross-examine properly. They need to know really what the standards are for the particular kind of PPO that you have, and they need to know how to get evidence and witnesses in front of the judge who's going to be making the decision on this. Because if you properly file a motion to modify or terminate within the proper time frame, that starts an entire court hearing process where you, as the respondent, the person who's been served with the PPO, get to go and defend yourself in front of the judge. And it's an interesting thing because even though it's you bringing the motion to modify or terminate, the other party, the party that filed the PPO, they have to prove to the judge why the PPO needs to stay in place, and those reasons have to fit within the description of the law and the reasons why. And people who go into these kind of hearings unrepresented, oftentimes, they think, well, I'm just going to explain the entire situation because the truth will just come out, or they talk far too much at the hearing, or they don't know what questions to ask, or they just bring stacks of text messages between the parties with no real strategy or organization, or they get emotional on the stand. These are all things that are going to sink your case if you're trying to defend yourself against a PPO. PPO hearing is not, it's not therapy. It's not a place to air your grievances and talk about all the wrongs that the person has done to you. It is actual litigation. It's elements that need to be met, and you need a litigator. You need a PPO trial attorney who's willing to go in there and fight on your behalf. As I promise you, the other side is going to be exaggerating. They're going to be making up more claims. They're going to be trying to put in emotional hooks and play the victim so that they can have this process, this PPO process, stay in place so they have leverage over you. So when this happens, what do we do about it? What's the real approach? And I take a very specific, systematic approach to vending such things, and I suggest that you find a lawyer that does as well. When we defend a PPO here in Michigan, we don't just show up and hope for fairness and try to explain the situation. You have to analyze the affidavit, the accusations line by line. You have to compare, text evidence. You would not believe how many people file a PPO on somebody and then include like evidence where the evidence is not showing the entire situation. They'll only show one side of an entire conversation with no context whatsoever. And you need an attorney who's going to go get that other side, if it is retrievable, and present it to the court. We're going to cross-examine that other person. We're going to make them prove that there is the potential of irreparable harm, and quickly, if this thing doesn't stay in place. We're going to identify contradictions and cross-examine the person who is filing. And where appropriate, we're going to move for full dismissal. In order to be successful in defending yourself against a PPO, you need an attorney who's willing to challenge weak allegations directly. And quite frankly, not every lawyer is comfortable doing that. It's not a comfortable position to be in. If you want truth and justice, that is what you need. If you want the truth to come out, and if you really want justice and don't want to have to live with these restrictions, that is exactly what you need. There's other solutions to the PPO as well, outside of just having a formal hearing. And the bright side of things is, in many family matters, we're able to actually come to a reasonable resolution where both parties can actually calm down, and we can sort of mediate a strategy so that a PPO doesn't have to be in place, but maybe there is a cooling off period between parties. That's always an option too, and it helps to have counsel with extensive experience in these kind of negotiations who can approach these problems in a emotionally charged way that can get the real result that you need, which in the end is to not be, part of the law enforcement information network. You want to just have that space. You want to have that cooling off period, because nobody really wants to have to deal with the court system in Michigan. Even if you win, you still have to pay attorneys, and you still have to go through the stress of hearings, and that's just not fun. Nobody wants to do that. Look, if you've been served with a PPO here in Michigan and you believe it was, filed unfairly or has gross exaggerations on it, don't panic, okay? Don't panic, but you cannot ignore it. You got to understand the stakes. You got to understand the process, and you got to get counsel who's comfortably defending you, respondents, in real trial hearings. There's a difference between filing paperwork and really defending somebody in court. If you or somebody that you really care about find yourself in this situation, reach out to the Stickley Law Firm here in Hillsdale, Michigan. We serve Branch County, we serve Hillsdale County, Calhoun County, Lenawee County, and depending on the circumstance, we actually travel throughout the state. And we'll bring you in, or we'll have a phone consultation. We'll take a thorough look at what is going on with your case, and we'll see if we really can help. And if it's something that we can't help, we'll try and point you in the right direction to somebody who will be able to assist you. Till then, folks, stay safe, and we'll talk to you real soon.